The vast space station called Orin Gate floated in the quiet of deep space. Its silver hull reflected the light of a distant blue star, making it shine like a beacon between worlds. The station was a meeting place for many alien races, but today it had one special purpose. Leaders from the Talon Empire and the Human Alliance were gathering here to begin the first direct peace talks in many years. Princess Mira of the Talon Empire stood in her private docking chamber, waiting for the official welcome. She was dressed in a flowing white robe lined with silver threads that shimmered with each movement. Her dark hair was braided into a single long strand, and a silver crown rested lightly on her head. Her training since childhood had taught her to stand tall, to keep her face calm, and to show no sign of weakness in front of anyone. Still, she felt the smallest trace of nervousness. The Talon Empire had never met humans face to face before. Their histories were filled with misunderstandings, border skirmishes, and tense communications across the stars. Now she had been sent to represent her people in person. She had read many reports about human behavior, but she knew that no written file could truly prepare her for meeting one. The chamber door opened with a soft hiss, and a tall human man stepped inside. He wore a dark blue military uniform with polished boots, and a small silver badge on his chest. His short brown hair was neatly kept, and his face was calm but watchful. His eyes, a clear shade of gray, moved across the room until they settled on her. "Princess Mira," he said, his voice even and respectful. "I am Daniel, Lieutenant of the Human Alliance Fleet. I have been assigned as your escort during your time on Orin Gate." Mira studied him for a moment. His stance was straight, but he did not seem stiff. He moved like someone trained for discipline but comfortable in his own skin. She gave a small nod. "Lieutenant Daniel, I accept your service during these talks." He stepped closer, keeping a formal distance. "The station's commander requests that I guide you to the council chamber for the opening ceremony. If you are ready, we can begin the tour along the way." She gestured toward the open doorway. "Lead the way." They walked side by side down a long corridor lit by soft panels in the ceiling. The walls were smooth and metallic, lined with translation devices that hummed faintly. Mira noticed the curious glances from other station staff as they passed. Humans, Talons, and several other species paused in their tasks to watch the princess and the human soldier together. Daniel kept his pace steady so she could walk beside him with ease. "The Orin Gate is one of the largest neutral stations in this sector," he said. "It was built to serve as a trade and diplomacy hub. I hope you will find it comfortable." Mira kept her expression calm. "It is well kept. Your people maintain it with care." A small smile touched his lips, though he did not look directly at her. "We try our best. Peace is easier to reach in a place that feels safe." The way he spoke was simple, without the layered formality her people used. She found it unusual. In her court, every word was chosen to hide true feelings behind ceremonial phrases. Here, Daniel's words seemed to be exactly what he meant. She wondered if this was a general human trait or just his own way. They reached a wide viewing deck where large windows looked out into space. Beyond the glass, stars glittered against the blackness. A long, sleek transport ship was arriving, its engines glowing faintly as it slowed for docking. Mira moved closer to the window, her robe brushing lightly against the floor. Daniel stood a short distance away, watching her without intruding. She could feel his gaze, steady and focused, and for a moment she found it difficult to keep her usual calm. It was not the kind of attention that made her uncomfortable. Instead, it felt as if he was studying her the way one might study a rare and fragile object, with care and interest. She turned slightly toward him. "You are used to guarding diplomats?" "I have been assigned to several before," he replied, "but never one from the Talon Empire." "Then we share the same first experience," she said. For a brief second, his eyes met hers directly. Something in that look unsettled her more than she expected. It was not hostile, nor overly bold, but it was direct in a way that her people would rarely use with royalty. She looked away to the stars, careful to keep her voice steady. "I trust that you will carry out your duty with the same care you give to all others." "I will," he said simply. They continued the tour, passing through the gardens at the center of the station. Artificial sunlight shone down from the ceiling, feeding rows of tall, green plants and colorful flowers from different worlds. Mira found herself slowing her steps to take in the scents and colors. Daniel matched her pace without speaking, letting her observe. It was an unspoken courtesy she appreciated. When they finally arrived at the entrance to the council chamber, the air was filled with the faint hum of machinery and the quiet murmur of delegates preparing inside. Daniel stopped and turned to her. "This is where I will leave you for the formal opening," he said. "I will remain stationed outside until the session is complete. If you require anything, you can call on me through the station's secure link." She gave him a small, measured bow of her head. "Thank you, Lieutenant Daniel. Your guidance has been clear." He gave a short nod in return. "It has been an honor to escort you." As she stepped inside the chamber, Mira felt the weight of many eyes on her. But somewhere in the back of her mind, she still felt the steady gray gaze of the human soldier who had walked beside her through the station. She straightened her posture, prepared to speak for her people, yet part of her wondered why his presence had left such a lasting impression. The council chamber was grand and filled with a low hum of voices. Long tables curved around a central platform where the delegates would speak. Holographic flags of different worlds floated above each table. Princess Mira sat at her place with the other members of the Talon delegation. Her expression was calm, her posture perfect, but her thoughts were not entirely on the speeches. Daniel was outside the chamber as he had promised, standing as her guard. She could not see him, but she was aware of his presence. It was a strange awareness, steady and distracting at the same time. She reminded herself that she was here for a purpose. The peace talks were important, and her people were depending on her to represent them with strength. The human ambassador began his opening words. His voice was firm yet warm as he spoke about the need to end years of misunderstanding. The Talon elder beside Mira responded with the practiced elegance of her culture, speaking about mutual respect and shared futures. The words filled the air like a woven fabric of diplomacy, each thread carefully placed. But for Mira, the speeches began to blend together. Her eyes moved over the room, noting the different species, the patterns on their clothing, the subtle gestures that carried meaning. She caught sight of a small window in the far wall, just enough for her to see the corridor beyond. Through it, she glimpsed Daniel standing at attention, scanning the hallway with quiet focus. Her chest tightened slightly. It was not because of fear or danger. It was something else she could not name. She quickly looked away before anyone noticed her distraction. When the first session ended, the delegates filed out to a reception hall for refreshments. The room was bright, filled with the scent of flowers and the soft sound of music. Mira walked with her delegation, her robe flowing behind her. Daniel was already there, waiting by the entrance. He gave her a polite nod as she entered. The elder in her group spoke to her in a low voice. "We will speak with the chorale representatives now. You may take a moment to observe the hall." Mira nodded, grateful for the small break. She stepped toward a display of art in the corner, where sculptures from different worlds were arranged in glass cases. Daniel moved to stand a respectful distance away, his hands behind his back. She studied a tall, spiral sculpture made of blue stone, trying to clear her mind. "Do you like it?" Daniel's voice came from behind her, low enough that only she could hear. "It is unusual," she said. Our art often shows balance and symmetry. This one seems to grow without a clear pattern. He stepped closer, his eyes on the sculpture. Sometimes, things that have no set pattern still hold beauty. She glanced at him. His words were simple, but they lingered in her thoughts. Perhaps, she said softly. They moved through the hall together, though always keeping a formal distance. She noticed that he spoke little unless she spoke first, yet he seemed fully aware of everything around them. His attention moved from group to group, noting the positions of the guests, the location of exits, and any movement that might be out of place. She had been trained to read people, but the way he did it was different. He was not judging for political intent, but watching for danger. When the reception ended, the delegation returned to the tour of the station. Daniel led them to the cultural wing, where different sections displayed the history of each major species. Mira's group walked slowly, pausing at the exhibits. She found herself next to Daniel again when they reached the human section. A large holographic display showed a blue planet covered in oceans and green lands. Earth, the sign read in several languages. Scenes of forests, mountains, and cities floated in the air. Mira watched them closely. Your world is alive, she said. It has many colors. It does, Daniel agreed. Where I grew up, the ocean was never far. I could hear it at night. She turned to him, curious. Do you miss it? Sometimes, he said, but duty takes us where we are needed. His tone was steady, but something in his eyes told her the answer was more than duty. She wanted to ask more, but one of her advisors approached, reminding her of the next meeting. They walked again through the corridors, the faint hum of the station's systems filling the silence. Daniel walked slightly ahead now, but she noticed how he adjusted his pace when they reached narrow passages, making sure she had space to move without rushing. It was a small detail, yet it told her much about him. As they neared the diplomatic quarters, Mira's communicator beeped softly. She lifted it and read a short message from one of her aides. The message was simple. Private meeting rescheduled. Stay in your room until called. She lowered the device and glanced at Daniel. It seems I will not be needed for some time. Then I will remain nearby, he said. Call me if you require anything. They reached her door. She hesitated before entering. Lieutenant Daniel, she said quietly, you speak in a way that is not formal, yet you are still respectful. Is that common among your people? He met her eyes, his expression calm. It depends on the person. For me, I believe honesty is its own kind of respect. Her training told her to end the conversation, to keep the lines clear between royal and soldier. But part of her wanted to ask more. She nodded slowly instead. I will remember that. She stepped into her room and the door closed behind her. Alone, she walked to the wide window that looked out into the stars. She thought about the long speeches, the art in the reception hall, and the holographic oceans of Earth. Yet most of all, she thought about the human soldier who stood so still and spoke so simply, and how it was becoming harder to keep her thoughts only on the treaty. The gardens of Oren Gate were one of its greatest attractions. Located near the center of the station, they stretched across 3 large domes filled with plants from dozens of worlds. Artificial sunlight streamed from the high ceilings, creating a warm glow over winding paths, gentle streams, and small bridges. The air carried the scent of flowers and damp earth, a rare comfort in space. Princess Mira walked through the main path with Daniel at her side. Her delegation had been given a short break between sessions, and she had requested to see the gardens. Her people valued green spaces deeply, as her homeworld was covered in wide forests and shining rivers. She had not walked among living plants since leaving her planet weeks ago. Daniel kept a steady pace beside her, scanning the area as they moved. He noted the positions of the few visitors present, the locations of exits, and the way shadows moved under the high leaves. Mira noticed his watchfulness, but said nothing. It seemed to be part of him, as natural as breathing. They paused by a small pool where thin fish swam in slow circles. Mira crouched slightly to see them more closely, her silver robe flowing around her. "These are from the coral seas," she said. "Their scales shift color in sunlight." Daniel glanced down at the pool. "I have never seen them before," he said. "They look calm." "They are. In my world, they are a sign of harmony." For a moment, the peaceful setting seemed untouched by the tension of politics. Mira felt her shoulders relax as she watched. The water. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled. A deep, muffled thud echoed from somewhere ahead. The pool rippled, and a faint alarm began to sound in the distance. Daniel's posture changed instantly. "Stay close," he said, stepping slightly in front of her. Mira straightened, her eyes scanning the garden. "What was that?" "Explosion," Daniel answered. "Not large, but close enough to be a problem." A second, sharper noise came from the left, followed by the hiss of steam from a broken pipe. The alarm grew louder. Mira saw smoke rising from beyond a cluster of tall plants. People in the distance began to shout and run toward the exits. Daniel moved quickly, guiding her toward a narrow side path away from the crowd. His tone was firm, but calm. "We do not go to the main gate. Too many people. Stay behind me." She followed, her heart beating faster. Her royal training told her to remain composed, yet the sharp scent of smoke and the sound of rushing footsteps made it harder. "Do you think this was an accident?" she asked. Daniel glanced over his shoulder. "I do not believe so." They turned a corner and reached a small service door. Daniel checked the panel and found it unlocked. He pushed it open and gestured for her to enter. Inside was a narrow maintenance corridor lit by dim panels. The air was cooler here, carrying the faint hum of machinery. "Where are we going?" Mira asked. "Back to the secure section," he said. "This way avoids open areas." They moved quickly through the corridor. Daniel's steps were quiet but purposeful, and his eyes never stopped scanning ahead. Mira kept pace, her robe brushing the metal floor. The station's alarms shifted to a different tone, signaling a security lockdown. As they neared an intersection, Daniel raised his hand for her to stop. He listened for a moment, then stepped forward slowly. Mira saw his shoulders, tense. From around the corner came faint mechanical clicks, the sound of something being adjusted. Daniel motioned for her to stay back, then leaned just far enough to see. His voice was low when he spoke. "2 figures ahead, not station security. They are setting something near the power conduit." Mira's pulse quickened. "Sabotage?" "Yes," he said. "We go another way." They turned back, but the sound of footsteps came from behind. Daniel guided her into a narrow alcove and pressed a small device on his wrist. A soft field shimmered around them, bending the light so they were harder to see. Mira had heard of such human technology, but never seen it up close. The footsteps passed, and Daniel waited a few seconds before lowering the device. "Clear, move." They took another path, this one leading upward through a maintenance stairwell. Mira noticed that Daniel placed himself between her and every possible threat. He did not rush recklessly. Every step was measured, every decision made in seconds. Finally, they reached a secure bulkhead guarded by 2 station officers. Daniel showed his identification, and the officers opened the door. Inside was a small security room with reinforced walls and a clear view of the corridor outside. Mira stepped inside and turned to him. "You moved as if you expected this." Daniel's expression was serious. "There have been quiet warnings about groups that want to stop these talks. I did not expect them to act this soon." She met his gaze. You shielded me without hesitation. That is not part of a simple escort's duty. He gave a small shrug. Keeping you safe is my duty. How I do it is my choice. For a moment, the noise outside seemed far away. Mira found herself studying the lines of focus on his face, the calm in his voice even after danger. It was strange to feel both unsettled and reassured at the same time. The security officer spoke from the console. Containment is in progress. We will update you as soon as the area is secure. Mira took a slow breath, her composure returning. She stood straight, as her position demanded, but she knew the memory of this moment would stay with her. The image of the human soldier moving through smoke and alarm to protect her was not something easily forgotten. Outside the secure room, the station still echoed with warnings, but here the walls felt solid. Daniel remained near the door, watchful as ever, his presence steady like a fixed point in a storm. Mira glanced toward him one more time. "Lieutenant Daniel," she said softly, "I am glad you were the one beside me." He gave a brief nod. "That makes two of us." The secure quarters were quiet, far from the alarms and noise of the garden incident. The room had smooth white walls, a soft light that mimicked a calm afternoon, and a large window showing the endless black of space. It was meant to be a place where diplomats could rest while threats were dealt with. Princess Mira stood near the window, looking out at the slow drift of stars. The Talon delegation had been moved to different safe rooms, each with its own guard. Mira's guard, as always, was Daniel. He stood near the door, hands behind his back, watching the corridor through a small screen. For a while, they spoke little. The silence was not uncomfortable, but it carried a weight that neither seemed ready to break. Mira thought of the moment, in the gardens, the sudden danger, and the way Daniel had acted without hesitation. He had led her through smoke and confusion, as if he had done it 100 times before. She wondered what kind of life shaped a person into someone who could stay that calm. Finally, she turned from the window. "Lieutenant Daniel," she said softly, "does your duty often bring you into danger?" He looked over at her, his expression steady. "Sometimes. In the fleet, there are missions where you expect it. Other times, it arrives without warning. Like today, and you do not fear it? I respect it," he said. "Fear is natural, but it can guide you if you use it the right way. It keeps you aware." She studied his face, searching for any sign of false confidence. There was none. He spoke as if he were simply describing the weather. "In my world," she said, "leaders are taught to hide fear entirely. We are told it weakens the will of those who follow us." He gave a small nod. "Hiding it has its place, but sometimes showing you understand the risk can build trust." His words stayed in her mind. Trust. It was not something she gave easily, especially outside her own people. Yet this human soldier had earned more of it in a single day than many in her court had in years. The room's soft light shifted slightly as the station entered a different rotation cycle. Daniel stepped away from the door and approached the table in the center of the room. "Would you like water or food? The station staff left supplies." Mira hesitated, then joined him at the table. "Water will be enough." He poured it for her and for himself. They sat across from each other, the distance still formal, but the air between them less so. Mira took a slow sip before speaking again. "Tell me about Earth. Not the facts in the reports. Tell me something you remember." Daniel thought for a moment. "I grew up near the ocean. At night I could hear waves hitting the shore. Sometimes the wind would carry the smell of salt. Through the air, you could walk along the beach and see the moon's light on the water, turning it silver. That is something I still think about when I am far from home." Mira imagined the scene. "It sounds peaceful. My home has great rivers that run through the forests. In spring, the water is so clear you can see the smooth stones at the bottom. The air smells of new leaves. He gave a faint smile. You miss it. I do, she admitted. But duty takes us away from the places we love. Their eyes met across the table. Neither spoke for a few moments, and yet the silence felt like part of the conversation. There was an understanding there, unspoken but strong, that both of them had left behind pieces of themselves for the roles they served. A soft tone sounded from the wall communicator. Daniel rose and pressed the control. A voice from station. Security reported that the garden area was under investigation, and no further danger had been detected for now. The delegates would remain in secure quarters until the next meeting. Understood, Daniel said before turning back to Mira. It seems we will be here a while. Then we may as well pass the time with conversation, she replied. So they did. Daniel told her about the first time he saw a starship leave orbit, how the engines lit the sky in a bright blue arc. Mira told him about the time she released a young hawk from her palace garden into the wild. He listened without interrupting, and she found that he never spoke only to fill silence. Every word had purpose. As hours passed, the distance between their seats grew a little smaller. Mira found herself leaning forward slightly when he spoke. Daniel, for his part, began to let the formality in his tone soften, though he never forgot his role. At one point, Mira asked, "When you were assigned to escort me, what did you expect?" "I expected someone who would keep me at a strict distance," he said honestly. "I was ready for that. And now?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "Now I think you are someone who sees more than you let others know." Mira felt her pulse quicken, though her face remained composed. "That can be both a strength and a weakness." "It can," he agreed. "But it makes you human, in the way that matters." She almost smiled at his choice of words, but chose to look back toward the window instead. Outside, the stars moved slowly across the darkness. She wondered if, somewhere far away, his oceans and her rivers both flowed under the same light of distant suns. The soft chime of the security system signaled that the cycle was nearing its end. Daniel rose and returned to his post by the door. Mira remained at the table for a while, thinking about the many layers of diplomacy, the danger that still lurked unseen, and the quiet hours she had just spent speaking with a human soldier. It was not something she had expected when she left her homeworld, yet it was becoming harder to imagine the talks continuing without him nearby. The secure quarters were quiet after the long day. The lights had dimmed to a soft glow, marking the station's night cycle. Princess Mira sat near the window, reading through a set of diplomatic notes on her tablet. Daniel stood by the door. As always, his posture straight, eyes on the corridor through the small security screen. It felt calm, but Mira had learned in the gardens that calm could break in an instant. The memory of the explosion was still fresh in her mind. She could see the smoke, hear the alarms, and remember the way Daniel had pulled her to safety. She pushed the thought aside and returned to her reading. The quiet was broken by a faint sound. It was not the usual hum of the station's systems. It was sharper, mechanical, like metal sliding against metal. Daniel's head turned slightly. He held up a hand to signal silence. Mira stopped reading and watched him. His focus had sharpened. He tapped the control on the wall screen, switching to the corridor camera. The view showed the hallway outside their door. At first it looked empty, but then a shadow moved along the far wall. Daniel's voice was low but firm. "We have visitors." Mira rose to her feet. "Station security?" He shook his head. "They move too quietly, and they are avoiding the cameras." The sound came again, closer now. Daniel stepped to the side of the door, drawing a small device from his belt. It was a compact tool that could disable the lock for silent exit. He looked at her. "We need to leave before they reach the door." She nodded without question. He opened the panel quietly, and they slipped into the corridor. The lighting here was even dimmer, the shadows deep along the walls. Daniel moved ahead, his steps silent. Mira followed close behind, keeping her robe from brushing the floor. They turned into a side passage that curved away from the main hall. The air here felt cooler, carrying a faint metallic scent. Daniel's head tilted slightly as he listened. Footsteps echoed faintly from behind them. Whoever was following had not lost their trail. "This way," Daniel whispered, pointing to a maintenance hatch. He opened it and helped Mira inside. The hatch led to a narrow service tunnel, barely wide enough for them to move side by side. The floor was metal, and pipes lined the walls. The sound of the footsteps faded slightly once the hatch closed, but they could still hear movement above them. Daniel kept his voice low. "They are searching room by room. They will reach where we were soon." Mira walked beside him, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. "Do you think they are the same people from the gardens?" "Most likely," he said. "If they got this far, they had help inside the station." The tunnel ended at another hatch, which Daniel opened slowly. They stepped into a storage room, filled with crates and sealed containers. He moved to the far wall and checked the hallway beyond. "Clear for now. Stay close." They left the storage room and took another corridor, this one lit with a pale blue glow from overhead strips. The soft hum of the station's engines was stronger here. Daniel walked with purpose, every turn chosen to avoid open spaces. Mira matched his pace, her mind alert, but calm. As they moved, a voice crackled softly from the small communicator on Daniel's wrist. It was a coded message from the station's security team. They had detected multiple unauthorized signals moving through the diplomat section. The team was trying to track them, but the intruders knew how to hide their movements. Daniel replied, in short, clear words. "Understood. Escorting VIP to safe location." They reached a long, narrow hallway with glass panels on one side, showing the dark void of space. Mira's eyes caught the slow drift of a cargo vessel moving outside the station. For a brief moment, the beauty of it distracted her from the danger. Then Daniel's sudden stop brought her focus back. Ahead, two figures stepped out from a side door, blocking the path. They wore dark suits with helmets that covered their faces. Each carried a small, compact device that could be used as a weapon or a tool. Daniel positioned himself between Mira and the intruders. His voice was firm. "You will stand down." The figures did not answer. They moved forward slowly, their steps in sync. Daniel shifted his stance, ready for action. He spoke, over his shoulder without looking back. "When I move, follow to the left side and keep going until you reach the next turn. Do not stop." Mira's heart beat faster, but she nodded. In the next second, Daniel moved sharply to the side, pulling a small flash device from his belt and activating it. A burst of bright light filled the hallway, reflecting off the glass panels. The intruders flinched, raising their hands to shield their eyes. "Go," Daniel said. Mira ran to the left as instructed, her robe brushing against the floor. She heard Daniel's quick steps behind her, followed by the sound of something striking the metal wall. They reached the corner and turned sharply. Another door stood ahead, marked with the seal of the station's inner security zone. Daniel keyed in a code, and the door slid open. They entered, and the heavy panel closed behind them with a solid lock. Inside, the air was cooler and the lighting brighter. Several station security officers were there, checking monitors and tracking movements. One of them looked up as Daniel entered. "We have you on the secure grid now. You are safe here." Mira slowed her breathing and stood straight, regaining her composure. "The intruders are still in the corridors," she said. "They knew where to find me." The officer nodded grimly. "We will find out how they got inside." Daniel remained near the door, watching the displays. His focus was still sharp, as if the danger had not yet passed. Mira glanced at him, remembering how he had moved with such precision and speed. She stepped closer. You knew exactly what to do. He gave a small nod. It is my job to make sure you are not caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. She looked at him for a moment longer before turning back to the officers. But in her mind, she knew it was more than just a job for him. And that thought stayed with her even as the security room doors closed, sealing them inside. The chamber was quiet except for the soft hum of the palace's energy shields. Mira stood near the tall crystal window, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon where the twin suns were setting. The light painted the sky in deep orange and gold, yet her thoughts were far from peaceful. Behind her, Daniel stood silently, respecting her space, but unable to ignore the tension in her posture. Mira, he said in a calm voice, you have been avoiding me since we returned from the council. What is wrong? She turned slowly, her royal composure still holding, but her eyes betrayed a deep unease. There is something I should have told you before. Something I have kept hidden because it could change everything. Daniel's jaw tightened. If it's about the Alliance, I already know the Council does not fully trust humans. I can handle that. She shook her head. It is not about trust alone. It is about the reason the Vehlari Empire is desperate to form this alliance. We are running out of time. Daniel took a step closer. Time for what? Mira glanced around the empty chamber as if the walls themselves might be listening. She moved toward him and spoke in a low voice. The enemy is not just the Tarthans. There is another force, something far older. It is waking again, and if it returns in full strength, it will destroy both our worlds. Daniel's brow furrowed. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I was sworn to secrecy, she said. Only the royal family and a few members of the High Council know. If the truth spreads, panic will follow. The Tarthan attacks are only a distraction. They are being manipulated. Her words sank into him like heavy stones. Who is manipulating them? She hesitated, her fingers curling slightly. A race known in our records as the Vathar. They are not many in number, but their power is beyond anything your world has seen. My ancestors fought them once, thousands of cycles ago. They won, but only barely. Now the signs show the Vathar are stirring again. Daniel's military instincts kicked in. If they are real, then you're saying this alliance isn't just politics, it's survival. She nodded. Exactly. And that is why I cannot let the council waste more time with debates and old grudges. Before Daniel could speak again, a deep rumble echoed through the palace. The crystal window flickered with energy as the shields absorbed a sudden impact. Mira's communicator chimed urgently. She tapped it, and a guard's voice came through. Your Highness, Tarthan ships have breached the outer perimeter. They are moving toward the capital. Daniel's eyes hardened. Then they've brought the war to your doorstep. Mira turned. To him, her voice steady despite the rising tension. I must go to the command center. If you are willing, fight by my side. I cannot do this alone. He gave a sharp nod. You'll never have to. They moved quickly through the palace corridors, the sound of alarms growing louder. Guards and attendants hurried past, some carrying weapons, others securing important data modules. The air was thick with urgency. As they entered the command center, the wide holomap showed red blips swarming toward the city. Mira's advisors stood tense around the display, arguing over defense positions. One of them, a tall man with silver hair, spoke sharply. We must evacuate the princess to the underground shelter. Mira raised her chin. No, I will lead the defense. If we run now, the capital will fall. Daniel stepped forward. She's right. If she disappears, the soldiers' morale will collapse. The advisor looked at him with thinly veiled distrust. And who are you to decide our strategy? Daniel's voice was calm but firm. I'm someone who has seen battles turn because one leader refused to hide. There was a pause, then Mira took control. Send ground troops to the eastern gate. Divert the shield generators to cover the northern approach. Daniel, take a squad and hold the western wall. If they breach there, the entire defense will crumble. Daniel gave a short bow. Consider it done. Minutes later, he was on the western wall scanning the sky. The Tarthan ships descended in dark formations, their engines roaring like thunder. Vehlari defense cannons fired streaks of blue energy, but the enemy pressed forward. Daniel took cover behind a barricade as a blast shook the wall. His squad, a mix of human and Vehlari soldiers, looked to him for orders. Hold your fire until they're close, he instructed. Make every shot count. The first wave of Tarthans landed, their armored figures advancing through the smoke. Daniel's squad opened fire in a precise, controlled barrage. The air filled with the hiss of energy bolts and the clash of metal on stone. In the command center, Mira watched the battle unfold on the tactical screen. Her heart raced as reports came in from every front. She knew that if Daniel failed to hold the western wall, the city would be overrun. A sudden alert flashed on her console. An unidentified energy signature was detected in the upper atmosphere. Her blood ran cold. It was not Tarthan. The Vathar, she whispered to herself. But there was no time to send a warning to Daniel. The enemy was already here. The air was thick with tension. Princess Mira stood in the command center, eyes fixed on the main screen. Red dots showed the advancing Tarthan forces, but a new and more terrifying symbol had appeared above them. The energy signature was unlike anything the Vehlari or human technology had ever seen. The Vathar have arrived, Mira said, her voice steady but low. Their power is great, and they bring destruction. Daniel stood beside her, his face hard with resolve. We need to act fast. The Tarthans are bad enough, but if the Vathar join the fight, the city won't last long. Mira nodded. We cannot rely on old strategies. This is a new war. Outside, the sky darkened as strange shapes moved through the upper atmosphere. The Vathar ships were large and alien, with surfaces that shimmered and shifted like liquid metal. They emitted waves of energy that disrupted communication and shield systems. Daniel turned to his squad, now reinforced with Vehlari soldiers. Prepare for close combat. Keep your shields strong and your minds sharp. The battle on the ground was fierce. Tarthan soldiers pushed forward in armored suits, clashing with Vehlari defenders. Daniel fought with skill and calm, guiding his team through waves of enemies. Each shot, each move was precise, but the real danger was above. Suddenly, a massive energy wave crashed down from the Vathar ships. Shields flickered, and many of the defense cannons went dark. Panic threatened to spread, but Mira's voice came through the station-wide communicator. Hold your ground! We fight not just for our homes, but for all who believe in peace. Her words echoed through the soldiers' minds, strengthening their will. Daniel saw an opening. Follow me. We push toward that power source controlling the wave. He led, a small team through ruined streets and crumbled walls. The city around them burned, but their steps did not falter. Reaching the source, they found a large Vathar device, pulsing with strange energy. Daniel raised his weapon and fired. The device cracked but did not stop. Mira arrived with reinforcements. Use everything we have, she ordered. Destroy that machine. Vehlari engineers worked quickly, setting charges and redirecting power. Daniel covered them, fighting off Tarthan reinforcements, trying to protect the device. With a loud explosion, the device shattered. The energy wave ceased, and the shields began to recover. The Vathar ships faltered, their power weakening. The Tarthans, losing their advantage, started to retreat. Mira and Daniel stood side by side, watching the last enemy ships disappear into the stars. It was a hard fight, Mira said, breathing deeply. But we survived. Daniel smiled, a rare softness in his eyes. Because we fought together. The peace talks resumed with new urgency. The alliance was no longer just a hope, but a necessity. Mira looked at Daniel and then at her people. Together, we are stronger than any enemy. Daniel nodded. And sometimes, courage comes from the most unexpected places. As the stars shone bright beyond the station's windows, two worlds found a new bond. The alien princess and the human soldier had faced the darkness and found light, not just in victory, but in trust and friendship.